All right, Meg, so who do we have this week?
All right, this week we are chatting with Kathy Derks. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you guys.
This might be the first athlete that I met at a bar that's on the podcast. So that's a distinction.
I feel honored.
I mean, we're all feeling pretty good when we met. It was post Boston Marathon, and I think all of us had been celebrating the day.
Yep, and I think that you were the one that told me that you drink vodka because you don't gain weight from vodka.
This is the truth. I mean, it's sort of a truth.
Yeah, so we met Kathy in Boston after she ran a blazing 2:34. So
Wow.
First of all, Kathy, congratulations, and how are you feeling?
Thank you. Feeling really good. My body is recovering well. Quads are finally coming around and not screaming at me anymore, but I'm feeling well and ready to get back to running.
I love that. So before we dive into all things Boston, because I do want to hear about that race day, take us back, way back to where you first started running.
I had first started running in 8th grade. I joined the track team, really didn't have any interest in it. I just did it because my friends were all doing it. And just to stay busy, my main focus was basketball, volleyball. Entering high school, I didn't do cross country. I joined the volleyball team, did basketball, but I did join the track team. And I was a short sprinter with them. And then after my first track season, I realized that I need to turn over to the dark side. Ran cross country, quit the volleyball team, still played basketball. So I was a 3-sport athlete all through high school. And then going into college, I ran all 4 years at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. And I ran all 4 years of indoor-outdoor track, where my specialty was 200, 400, 800. And then I also ran 3 years of cross country. No, 2 years of cross country. I joined my junior year, and I only joined the cross team in college to work on my 800. And then after college, I realized that I can't just randomly participate in 400 and 800s anymore. And through college, we still had our long runs every weekend, and that's really where my stem of distance running came, or like my love for distance running came from. And then after college, I just started to run farther and farther after work. I was still pretty active within that. Just my joy of running and passion within that stayed pretty strong. And then actually, like my goal and like why I started marathon training was because one day I was out on a run and I was like, I want to run the Boston Marathon. So I'm going to sign up for a marathon, run, and see what I can do and hope to qualify. And so my first marathon was in 2018, and I ran a qualifying time a day after the registration closed. So wasn't able to participate the next year, and then COVID happened, and then COVID, and then virtual, and now I'm finally able to come. So this Boston trip was like 4 years coming. So it was a huge build-up.
Hold on a second, though. You're saying that your second marathon is the Boston Marathon?
No. The Boston was my 6th marathon, but I ran my first marathon, which was a qualifying time, and I haven't just been able to go to Boston just because of the world and life. But I've ran other marathons in between there.
So your first marathon in 2018, I have your Athlinks pulled up here because I'm fascinated by it, was a 3:01.
Yep.
Okay, so going into that marathon, your goal wasn't just to finish a marathon, it was to race a marathon, I'm assuming. I mean, 3:01 is a pretty fast first marathon time.
Like, did you know that?
No. No, people always ask me that. And going into my first marathon, I had zero idea of what I was doing. Zero idea. I pulled a random training plan off of online that I Googled, followed that, ran all my runs the same pace, had no idea what I was doing. And I still had my speed from running all through college and everything. So I had all my fast twitch muscles still just firing all the time. So the combination of that training really led me to my 301, but otherwise I had no idea what I was doing.
But so through middle school and high school and college, obviously you stuck with running. Was it because you were successful at it and you were seeing like growth and success and progress, or did you just love running? Like what kept you at the sport?
Both. I just genuinely like have a passion for running and competing. But I didn't, and I was successful. I shouldn't say that I wasn't. I was very successful through high school and college, and I actually have 2 All-Americans with the 4x4 team that I ran in college. So I guess that's kind of it's still instilled in me, just that competitor and just always trying to get the next person in front of me. So, yeah.
I mean, the crazy thing for me is, and we're seeing this from time to time, is these unsponsored athletes that just pop out of seemingly nowhere to us. But obviously you have a career from all the way stemming back from high school and college. But it's just mind-blowing. Like we see you and go, okay, she doesn't have a sponsor, just ran a 134 in Boston. 132, yeah.
No, 234.
Oh. Numbers aren't my strong suit. Anyway, like it's like blazing, and like do you feel like you're getting the attention that time deserves, or like how do you feel about that time and being an amateur and being, what was her place at Boston?
8th American, 18th overall.
Which is kind of sick. At a world major.
Yes and no. Definitely feeling all the love from my friends, family, community, people that I ran with in college. But I don't get a lot of attention from companies or like people reaching out to me for like sponsorships or anything like that. Which I'm not really surprised about because sponsorships are really hard to get. So yes, like 234 is a very fast time, but I don't feel that that's attention worthy yet. And that might just be the amateur coming out in me, like not really knowing or still being relatively new to marathons and being at this level of an athlete. But I don't, like, nobody has reached out to me to, like, join their team or be a sponsor or anything like that.
And you were wearing Asics Metaspeed Sky for this race, right?
Yep.
How did you choose that shoe for the race? Because, like, that's the fascinating thing is, as a unsponsored amateur, you could pick anything you want. And any gear, any clothes, any nutrition. What made you pick the Metaspeed Sky for this attempt?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I always used to wear the Saucony Pros, and I would wear the Saucony Speeds for my training workouts, but they started to hurt my feet. And so I was like, I want to try something else. And I've never ran in Nikes. And so I was like, I don't really just want to jump into a Nike shoe because I have a little bit wider foot and Nikes are a little bit more narrow. So I was like, I don't want to just jump into them. I'm going to explore what my other options are because they're like, regardless of brand, there's people like very successful professional athletes who are wearing numerous brands that like can contribute and compete to the Nike shoes. So it's like, I'm gonna try the Asics. And I first had bought the Meta, or like their training shoe, or like not the fully carbon plated shoe.
The Metaspeed?
Yes. I tried the Meta Speed because that was like the equivalent to the Saucony Speed. And I really liked that. And so I was like, I'm going to just try the Meta Speed Sky. And I didn't realize that Asics had the two different carbon plated shoes focused towards either being a cadence runner or a stride runner. And so my cadence doesn't really change. So I was like, I'm going to go with the Sky. Wore them for the first time, and I was like, my feet feel at home. Like, I am cruising along in these shoes, and when, like, tailored to being a stride runner, I could totally feel it right off the bat the first workout that I did with them. Very responsive. They're a little bit more aggressive than the Sauconys, but they're lower to the ground, and they have a wider toe box, so my foot could finally like spread out to what it needed to, and just like I said, being lower to the ground, I felt way more secure. So I was like, this is it. Never turning back to the Sauconys.
Damn, that was a good shoe review too. Like
I
the way
know.
you described that is very understandable of what appealed to you about the shoe. A lot of times we talk to people and they're like, I just like that one. But that's awesome. And the new version, it just came off embargo this past week, so we've been posting pictures of that, and you're going to get a little more cushioning. Did you find that by the time that you were at the end of the Boston Marathon that you were still comfortable, like feet were still comfortable?
For the most part, yes. The balls of my feet were like going numb and hurting a little bit, but I mean, that's 20 miles of racing on your feet, plus being a new shoe. I only had 20 miles on those shoes before I ran in them in Boston. So my foot's still getting familiar to the shoe, but otherwise, like, yes, they were comfortable, and I would highly recommend. And I'm interested to see what the new version is all about.
Okay, there's more cushion, and I think the plate got moved a little bit further away from the foot, so the balls of your feet should feel a little better at that later stage. So I think it's going to be a really good update. And Emma Bates has been running in it, and I know some of the Sarah Hall. So yeah, we'll definitely have to make sure you get a pair.
I won't say no.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back real quick to your marathon progression a little bit. So after you run that first 3:01, and you said you did that with random training, not really knowing what you were doing. At that point, did you realize after you ran that first one, oh, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I want to break 3 hours. Like, what was your mindset after that first one?
Yeah, after that first marathon, I joined a few local running groups, got connected with other runners, and it wasn't until then when I really started to get into the marathon training, because obviously, as you guys know, the running community is just phenomenal, and the connections that you make with other people, sharing what you love, sharing the struggles, sharing the workouts and everything. So that's really what got me into having a passion for the marathon distance. And so being so new to running marathons, I didn't know what was good or what was bad until I started joining them, and they're like, hey, like, you can do some stuff here. And I'm like, okay. But I didn't have, like, I went into my second marathon, still like self-coached, all of that. And then it wasn't until after that I started working with my current coach, where we started to tailor my workouts specifically towards the marathon, doing specific training, including weight training. So she's really the minds behind what I do, and she does all the hard work. I just run the miles.
Who's your coach?
Her name's Callie Bartel.
Okay. So quick question for you. As you get faster and you're at that level where not a lot of women are going to be able to maybe join you for your runs and your workouts, are you finding that you're running with more men in these groups, or are you finding yourself running by yourself?
On a day-to-day basis, I pretty much train all alone. I do have one other gentleman that I do run with. His name's Tyler, and we just mainly run our easy runs together. He's pretty fast too. He just ran a 2:46 at CIM this past January, so he's right up there and doing really, really well, and I'm excited to see where he's going. He's also coached by Callie too.
Yeah. But not as fast as you.
What?
But not as fast as you.
So we will run a majority of our training runs together, but I mainly am alone, doing all my workouts alone and everything. So
Your second marathon, you do a 250. I have to imagine you're thinking about OTQing. Was that a goal? Okay, talk to us about that and what happened.
I ran the 250, and then after that, I was signed up to run the Milwaukee Lakefront Marathon. I think that coming fall. But going into Milwaukee, I ran like a 2:59 there, I think. But going into the race, I was really sick. I had a few injuries. Shouldn't have even gone to the start line. And so ran that race. I don't remember any of it, so I can't recall. And then I took a lot of time off after that. I didn't run for close to 5 or 6 months. Just trying to get healthy, recover from my injuries, and then I jumped back into it. And then my first race back healthy, that's when I ran in Carmel, Indiana, and that's where I ran my 2:39.
What was going through your head during those 5 or 6 months when you weren't training? Like, were you fine with the downtime? Were you struggling with the downtime? What was that experience like?
It was just a daily struggle, especially because I would see all my friends running, achieving their goals, and I was so happy for them, but it's just FOMO. Like, I wanted to be there doing my thing, my passion. I was still able to stay active for the most part. I biked a lot, I ellipticaled a lot, but I had 4 stress fractures. I had 2 in both my heels, and then 1 in each of my shins. So any sort of strength training, jumping, plyometrics, running was a no-go. So I sat on my butt a lot, and it was hard. Mentally, it was more mentally hard than physically hard than anything.
And that time frame overlapped with the Olympic trials, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to watch that. I mean, that must have been in itself hard because I'm sure you wanted to be out there with all those women.
Yes, that was especially hard, but knowing that that wasn't the last trials and I would still have another opportunity to go for it. And at that time, like, I really wanted to be there, but my focus, I had to shift to just getting healthy. My focus was just getting back to the start line. So I couldn't focus on really anything else but that.
Did you work with anybody on the mental side, or did you just deal with it on your own?
Yes and no. I would talk to some people. I saw a therapist for a little while, but I stopped seeing them, and then I just kind of dealt with it on my own. So that was hard too, because Wisconsin doesn't really have a lot of sports-specific therapists. And so just going to, I don't want to say normal, but just going to a normal therapist, they don't have the athlete mindset or the experience of working with other athletes. And so when I would try to explain to them what I was feeling or what I was experiencing, they couldn't relate, and they didn't really have a whole lot to give back to me. And practicing cross states with other sports therapists, it's expensive and a lot of the times not covered by insurance. And so that's why I didn't go back to see anybody for help, just because it's a big expense.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we first wanted to start talking about nutrition with running, we talked to a nutritionist that was not a sports nutritionist, that was just, maybe something that you would go to if you wanted to lose a couple pounds or something like that, or change your eating habits. And we went to one visit and we were like, I don't think she understands us at all. Like, she was telling Megan to be on less than 2,000 calories. And I'm like, this woman is running 70 miles a week.
Yeah, it wasn't tailored for an athlete. And so that's very relatable. Like, you have to understand the athlete to really recommend, best practices.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think both of those things, on the mental side and the nutrition side, when it comes to the mental state of running and competing, it's often not talked about. And so when you do try and reach out for other people, and it's not as common to talk about that, and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So yeah, totally agree that people just don't understand unless you're in it.
So you go and run this 2:39 coming out of this sort of, downtime for you. I mean, that must have been an amazing experience and day, and sort of make you feel like it was all worth it.
All the time and effort and energy that I put into just resting and recovering and doing all the little things right, it just finally all came together. And I call that my celebration race, because it wasn't about the time, it wasn't about the place, it was the fact that I worked so goddamn hard to get there. So I celebrated all of that hard work. And it just so happens that I ran a great time on top of it.
And did you win?
I won females.
Yeah.
I think there was a male who ran that race who ran like 2:28. But I just need to set the stage for you guys for this race. And I love telling this story because it was in the dead of COVID. And so nobody was racing. This race was in a small town in Indiana. And I think a total between the marathon and half marathon, 400 people or less. And it's the Veterans Memorial Marathon. And all of a majority of the volunteers are veterans. And so I'm crossing the finish line. And it's a very cold day. Very cold. Real feel of, I think, 10 or 12 degrees.
Mm.
And so I'm bundled, but I'm sweating and I'm cold. And I cross the finish line just trying to catch my breath. You guys know the feeling. And this veteran volunteer comes up to me and he's patting me on the back and he goes, "Honey, go get some chili." And I'm like, I'm okay. He's like, "No, you need to get the chili. There's soup in there. Go get it. He's like kind of like pushing me and shoving me. And I'm like, I'm okay. He's like, "Oh, I'll go get you some." I'm like, I'm okay. I just need some water. He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's over there." And I'm like, "You're going to go get me chili, but you can't get me a water?" And I'm just like, okay, whatever.
He probably
and
made
like
the chili.
no spectators. What'd you say?
I said he probably made the chili. And that's why I was like, you got to have it. But you look at a race like that where there's 400 people and it feels like 10 degrees. That's 400 hardcore people. Those aren't, and especially during COVID, the people that wanted to race that bad, these are competitors, and you see that like for a little tiny race like that, a guy coming out and running a 2:28 or whatever. I mean, these are people that are dying to get out there for a race. So I mean, the numbers could offset a little bit of like who's actually out there.
A lot of people who competed traveled. I think he came from like states away just to participate.
Yeah.
I meant to ask because when I saw the date, I'm like, November 2020, that was like COVID time. I didn't even know that this race happened.
Nobody did.
400 people did.
How did this get on your radar?
So 2 other girlfriends ran the race with me, and I think one of them just said, "Hey, this race is happening. Let's do it." And I was like, "Okay." So it wasn't promoted at all.
Yeah.
All right. So quick question for you on the psychological side. Different people run different. They perform best at different mental states. Some people are good at running angry. Some people have to be in a good mood. And some people, what is it when you know that you step up to the line, what kind of frame of mind do you know you're going to have a good day?
I think when I'm just totally relaxed and happy. And I just truly have a passion for running. And knowing that I have the ability to do what I love every single day, and just approaching the start line thinking a lot of people wish that they could be here. And just having the opportunity to show up for myself, show up for my family, brings me a lot of joy. And so just knowing that I have them alongside me and just being totally calm.
All right.
So let's talk about Boston. We already know you run a 2:34. You are the 8th American, 18th female overall. You beat people like Natasha Wodak and Sarah Vaughn. You're running in the pro field. Let's just start from the beginning. How were you feeling at the start line? Was it that calm, happy that you were just describing?
It was, actually. And I think a lot of that came from that we're shuttled to the start far in advance before the race. So I had the opportunity to just hang out with all the other pro runners for a little bit before the race. And what calmed my nerves was to see them calm, to see them chatting, to see them just being a normal athlete just like everybody else. And so that brought me down a little bit. But also I was calm because I didn't have anything to prove. I'm not sponsored. I wasn't doing it for anybody else. I was doing it for myself. So if I blew up, cool. If I performed really well, double cool. So I didn't have any pressure to run a certain way or be with anybody else.
I mean, there had to be a little pressure that Believe in the Run might interview you if you did well, right?
That was in the back of my mind.
Okay.
Talk to me about the actual process of getting on the pro field. How does that work? Do you submit a time? Do they reach out to you? What does that look like?
So on the actual registration that everybody else registers for, there's just a box where you can click register as a professional athlete, and then they review all of the applications. They send you an acceptance letter, and then they tell you that you're not allowed to announce it or anything like that. And then the day of that they're going to announce it, they were like, well, we'll announce it mid-February or January or whenever they did. And then the morning of the announcement, they'll give you the press release, they'll give you all the information, and then you're able to share.
How cool is that? Did you save the letter? Is it framed or anything?
No, but I have it in my inbox still.
Oh, it's a digital. I thought maybe you got a paper. Like acceptance to college.
How crazy
Thomas,
is it?
It's the 21st century.
I know. Well, wait, I thought, the mail delivery guy on horseback. It's Boston. It's not that.
The pigeon.
Yeah, the pigeon teletype.
Is it not a little crazy to think that a few years ago you were trying to qualify to run this race with us amateurs in the normal field, and now the first time you toe the line at Boston, it's with a group of professional women?
It's just an incredible feeling, and it's hard for me to wrap my brain around. And I tell people this all the time because I train alone. I live in a small town where we have a running community, but it's not a running community like being in Chicago or Boston. So I just view myself as the average everyday runner. And so being able to experience it on a bigger platform and with the Olympians is just, it was an incredible feeling.
It was the deepest field ever, too. That's the crazy thing. So you did well, but you did well in the deepest pro field they've ever had at Boston. Isn't that correct? Am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. For Wisconsin, you betcha.
You mentioned that the pros were chatting like casually before the race start. Were you chatting along with them, and who were you talking to, and what were you guys talking about?
Yeah, I was chatting with them all morning. I don't remember everybody's name, but I mean, Molly was there, Sarah was there, Stephanie Bruce was there.
Dez.
Nell and Des were kind of like off doing their own thing, getting in their mind or getting like ready. But there was just a big group of women who were just all hanging out. And in that church, it's cold. It was freezing. And so we were all just like in a small room that was the warmest room in the whole church, just trying to body heat and not be freezing. So they had yoga mats and everything down for us too that we could sit on and stretch out, and towels. So it was so fun. And talking about everything from the race to everyday life to dating, you name it, it was probably out there.
I'd like to have a microphone in that room.
Yeah. So the gun goes off. I'm sure that your coach and you had some sort of a race plan. Tell us, did you follow it? What was like the start like? Did you go out with a pack?
Yes, we did have a race plan, but it was kind of like a tentative pencil-in race plan because this was my first Boston, and I prepared myself as much as I could for the race, but you don't actually know what to expect until you're actually out there. And so I watched some videos on YouTube to kind of visually see the course, but it's so different than actually running. And then just talking to other people about the hills and the course and the rolling hills and the flat part, it's like, well, that can also be kind of relative, because a bad hill to me could be an easier hill to you. And so I knew what to expect, but also at the same time I didn't. And so going into it, we just kind of talked about paces and where I should be, how I should feel, that sort of thing. And I told my coach after, I was like, Callie, regardless of how I ran, like time-wise, place-wise, I'm happy about how smart I ran that race. Because I'm still new at marathon running, and I'm an amateur. And so I've totally reframed my mindset of just going rogue and being stupid about my racing and just running with them because I can run with them. So I told her, I was like, regardless of what happened, I'm happy about how smart I ran that race, and I ran within my limits. Because we started the race and we were downhill, and I clicked off my first few miles and I was like, okay, this is fine, but it kept getting faster and faster. And then I looked down at my watch and it was like 5:15, 5:20, and I was like, shit, this is exactly what my coach told me not to do. So going into the race, I was talking to a few other girls and we kind of wanted to be around the same time. So I look over and I was like, I'm pulling back now. And they like looked down at their watch and they're like, yep, sounds good. So we pulled back immediately. And I'm so glad that we pulled back when we did, because we could see like the lead pack just immediately, there was a big gap, but we could see people falling off like just continuously. And we both look at each other. We're like, oh, we made the right decision there. And then going into the flat part between like 10, 11, we're like, okay, we don't have to do anything here. This should be super easy. Shouldn't be pushing the pace at all. We have the whole rest of the race. Like the race didn't even start yet. And so I had some of but besides the hills, I had some of my slowest miles within the flat part. But then after that, I was alone. After mile 11, 11 and alone, all the way to the finish, I was solo. So
there wasn't even like men catching up from the regular group, or you were just out there in that no man's land the whole time? Mm-hmm. Wow.
Which I was surprised that no men were catching me, because the men in that first wave can run 220, 225. Now, I for sure thought people were going to start catching me around the halfway point, because even though that's only 15, like they started 15 minutes later, but they're running so much faster. So nobody caught me, even at the end, which I was surprised about. Oh, actually, I take that back. One man caught me at the end.
How did you feel about the hills? Like, I know you were prepared for them, but were they what you expected?
Yes and no. Going into it, I was like, okay, there's 4 hills. But I don't even know where, like I ran the first 2 and I was like, okay, mentally, we're done with those. Behind us, just tackle the next 2. And I don't even know where hill 3 was. All I know was the first 2 and then heartbreak. So I totally missed the 3rd one.
That's
and
so
then
cool.
After the fact, I was like, where was it?
That's awesome.
What's so funny about that is I felt like the hill at 19, which I think is like the 3rd hill, was the worst one of the whole day. And apparently you just flew over that one.
I thought the second one at mile 17 was the worst.
That's where we waited last year. So we're actually filming someone last time that was doing Chicago, Baltimore, and Boston all back to back. And we were at that 17, and we got to see several athletes just struggle up that hill.
Mm-hmm. You're by yourself the whole time, but are you every few miles passing any women?
Every few miles I was. But even though I was alone, I never felt like I was alone, because you guys know the crowd there is phenomenal. And so there was still people cheering for me the whole time, every step of the race. So even though I was running alone, I never felt like I was alone. But I started to catch some people later on in the race towards the last few miles. And I didn't know where I was in regards to place or anything, because I can't see. So I had no idea how well I did until I got back to my phone and my fiance was like, "You kicked ass."
And so are you looking at your watch at all during the race? Like, does pace, I mean, obviously in the beginning you didn't want to go out too fast, but once you sort of set into that controlled state, are you still trying to hit a certain number finish time wise, keep a certain pace, or are you just running everything by feel?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I knew, like, I was looking at my watch, I could see the splits, but everything was all over the place. So I wasn't running even. I was consistent between the 540 and 550 range. But with the rolling hills and then the hills, nothing was consistent. And so I was just truly running based off of feel. Yeah. Like, I used the downhill to my advantage the best that I could, and then just working up the uphills step by step.
So,
but
I was going to say there's got to be a leap sort of between, and you come from the track and cross country, so you're used to running these faster paces. But was there a psychological component to like dropping below 6 minute miles for long runs and stuff? Like, did you have to kind of hit a threshold where you're like, I'm comfortable running in the high 5s, versus being in the low 6s?
That's just wrapping your brain around the thought of running that fast for that long, I think, is the biggest thing that people have to overcome in order to get faster. So just being okay with seeing the faster times on your watch and being able to dissociate the time with the discomfort was the biggest thing that I had to overcome. But I was actually having a conversation with my fiance about this yesterday, when I said that running the 800 was worse than running a marathon. And he just like, he's a football player, and so he understands distances in football fields. So he's like, I just can't comprehend that. And I'm like, yes, but for an 800, you're running 2 minutes, 10 seconds. For a marathon, you're running for 2-3 hours. With the marathon, it's slow and steady. But with the 800, the pain that you're in that entire time is horrible. And so I think that's why I'm okay with a little discomfort with the longer paces, because I've hurt a hell of a lot worse than what that feels like.
We always say that about the 5K. We're like, 5Ks are horrible. They're just the worst if you're running them hard. Versus, it's like we were doing a run this morning, and I felt like we dropped it down to half marathon pace for me, which would be a slow crawl for you. And I was just like, this feels comfortable because I've been doing so much stuff that's been uncomfortable that it's just slightly less uncomfortable. So getting back to the mindset, like, what did you do to get, like, was there a trick, or did you just have to just keep practicing to get to the point where the effort and the pace you disassociated so that you weren't like freaked out by the fact that you were now running 26 miles at a sub 6 minute pace?
I actually do a lot of visualization leading up to the race, and even going into a lot of my workouts and long runs. I visualize myself running those workouts, running the races at that pace. I visualize how I'm going to feel and how it should feel. And I always go into my races and workouts breaking it up. And what I mean by that is I never go into a marathon thinking I have 26 miles ahead of me. I go into the race and I break it up by when I take my nutrition. So I go into it from the start being like, I only have to run 6 miles right now. 6 miles. That's all I have to do. Take my nutrition, race starts over. I only have to run 5 or 6 more miles right now. The past is the past. It's a new race right now. I only have to run this much. So it's really just 5 by 5 mile repeats. And so that's what gets me through the mental piece of tackling the marathon. And I do that for pretty much all my workouts too. I just take it rep by rep.
Like specifically during Boston, was there a time where you got uncomfortable or, things hurt, and how did you get yourself out of that? Or was it a perfectly great day that you never felt bad?
For the most part, I felt okay throughout the entire race. But those last few miles after the hills, I was like, come on, let's just get to the finish line. And everyone probably feels like that. I know I'm not the only one. But otherwise, I felt good throughout the whole race.
Okay, so this time officially qualifies you for the Olympic trials in 2024. That has to be a pretty amazing. I mean, it is an amazing accomplishment. Like, how are you feeling post race, and are you going to take time to relax and take some time off, or is your mind already churning for the next thing?
Yeah. Super, super excited that I did qualify officially for the trials, because even though I had some qualifying times, I knew I wasn't within the window. And so there's always that little piece of me that was like, can I actually get there again? So knowing that I do have my time takes a little bit of ease off of me. I am not running a fall marathon this year because I'm getting married. So I'm just going to fully embrace the wedding season. I'm getting married October 1st, so I'm going to fully embrace it. And I'm planning on racing Houston in January of 2023. So between now and then, I'll just run a few shorter races. I'll run a half marathon, and I'll still be training and everything. I just won't that just won't be my main focus this fall.
Okay. We're excited for your wedding. But so when you're setting up these goals for like your next round, or do you already have numbers in your head that you're like, I think I can squeeze out a few more minutes, or there's a goal time I'd love to be at? I mean, everybody likes those round numbers, and you're right there hovering around the 230 mark, sub 230 mark. Like, what's going through your head?
At Houston, I'd really like to be around 232. Just knowing what I did in Boston and that course, I know that I can run faster than a 234. Especially with how I felt throughout the day, I know I can run faster than that.
Here's Megan's favorite 3 questions at the end of the podcast.
Headphones or no headphones on a solo run?
Headphones.
All right. What's on your playlist?
I listen to 90s country.
All right.
Well, that would include some of Megan's favorite Taylor Swift, so.
Do you count her? Probably not. Maybe. Any Taylor on there? No, I didn't think so. She's not real country.
Okay.
Okay. What is your, we kind of know this, I think, celebratory post-race meal or beverage, or both?
Oh, chicken sandwich, sweet potato fries, and the hoppiest IPA I can find.
Nice.
I love it. We know you have another career, so do you have your dream career, or is there something else you would pursue?
Yes, my full-time job, I am a corporate recruiter. But if I was not a corporate recruiter, I would love to be a sports dietitian, just like Featherstone. It's just so fascinating to me, and just helping others achieve their goals, and the chemistry and how the body works and the physiology behind it is just so intriguing to me.
Well, we should get you into the Featherstone Nutrition University that you're starting.
I should go in it.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Kathy, thank you so much. It was super fun to hear a little bit more about your background and how you got into running. And I'm just so excited for you, and congrats again on an amazing performance in Boston. I hope that you celebrate this for a long, long time.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It means a lot.
Yeah, remember us when you're a big stud and you have all the,
Pro
the
contracts coming at
yeah.
you.
When we see you at places, you still got to wave.
I doubt that will happen, but I will always remember you.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thanks.